Hey everyone, tonight we're taking a gentle stroll back in time, not to the roar of a colosseum or the bustling markets of an empire, but to the quiet groves and sun-drenched hills of ancient Greece. We're going to open a very old, very wise storybook filled with creatures that talk lessons that linger and truths that are just as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. Welcome to the whimsical, wonderful world of ancient Greek fables. You're about to meet some crafty foxes, proud lions, and very determined tortoises, though fair warning, if you try to outsmart a fox, you probably won't survive without losing your lunch. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from in the comments below and what time it is for you right now. And if you're keen to keep unraveling these historical oddities and follow the channel to be ready for the next exciting parts. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in the rugged landscape of ancient Greece, where olive trees dot the hillsides and the scent of wild thyme hangs in the warm air. The sun dips towards the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Around a crackling fire, a small group of villagers gathers their faces, illuminated by the dancing flames. They're listening intently to a storyteller, his voice low and rhythmic, weaving tales that aren't just entertaining, but also carry a subtle wisdom. This is the fabled beginnings out of Aesop, or rather the tales attributed to him emerging from an oral tradition, long before they were ever written down. Imagine the atmosphere, the comfortable silence broken only by the storyteller's voice, the distant bleating of a sheep, and the occasional snap of the fire. The mainstream historical fact here is that Aesop himself, the legendary author of these fables, is a figure shrouded in mystery. We don't have definitive proof of his existence as a single individual. He might have been a composite character, a legendary name given to a long line of Greek storytellers who popularized these moral tales. This isn't like finding Shakespeare's birth certificate. It's more like trying to pinpoint the exact origin of a beloved folk song. The quirk of Aesop's origins is the popular belief that he was a slave, perhaps even physically disfigured, who used his wit and storytelling prowess to gain freedom or influence. You might picture him not as a grand philosopher in a toga, but as a humble figure, perhaps with a twinkle in his eye, captivating his audience with stories of talking animals. Historians still argue whether Aesop was a real person, a collection of stories, or a semi-mythical figure around whom these practical, often satirical tales coalesced. Regardless, the tales themselves have certainly survived the test of time, proving more enduring than many grand historical figures. These fables weren't elaborate epics like Homer's Odyssey. They were short, sharp, often humorous anecdotes designed to deliver a moral lesson, a nugget of practical wisdom, or a clever commentary on human nature. Think of them as the original life hacks delivered with a bit of animal charm. You can almost hear the villagers nodding in agreement as the storyteller finishes a tale, recognizing the human foibles reflected in the actions of the animals. They were easy to remember, easy to share, and highly adaptable, which contributed to their enduring popularity. The beauty of the oral tradition is how these stories could evolve and adapt, picking up new nuances, with each telling tailor-made for the audience of the moment. It was a fluid living library of wisdom passed down from generation to generation, often without a single word being written down. And it all started with these simple, profound observations about life disguised as delightful conversations between animals. As the embers of that ancient fire glow softly and the storyteller's voice still resonates in your mind, you find yourself transported directly into the heart of one of the most enduring fables, a tale that perfectly captures the essence of Aesop's wisdom. The Ant and the Grasshopper. This isn't just a story about bugs, it's a timeless lesson on foresight, hard work, and the consequences of idleness. Imagine a sun-drenched Greek summer, the air thick with the buzzing of insects and the scent of wild herbs. You see a busy, tiny but determined, tirelessly scuttling back and forth across a dusty path. It's lugging a piece of grain, perhaps twice its size, its little legs pumping with tireless energy. Its antennae twitch, sensing the urgency of the season. Meanwhile, perched idly on a blade of grass, a flamboyant grasshopper. strums his lyre, his songlight, and carefree, his green body shimmering in the sun. He looks utterly without a care in the world, basking in the present moment. The mainstream historical fact here is that this fable in various forms has been a cornerstone of moral education across cultures for millennia, emphasizing the virtue of diligence and preparation. It's one of Aesop's most widely recognized and frequently retold tales, a staple in everything from ancient scrolls to modern children's books. The quirk, however, lies in the grasshopper's complete lack of self-awareness. You might think, surely he sees the ant working, he knows, winter is coming. But no, his focus is entirely on the immediate pleasure of the moment. He genuinely seems perplexed by the ant's relentless industry, perhaps even a little scornful of it. Historians still argue whether Aesop's fables primarily served to educate the young on civic virtues, or if they also functioned as subtle social commentary, perhaps gently critiquing the idle rich through the metaphor of the grasshopper. Regardless, the message is clear. You can almost hear the rhythmic clack, clack, clack of the ant's legs as it scurries a tiny engine of productivity. And then the contrasting, lazy strum, strum, strum of the grasshopper's lyre, his cheerful, indifferent song, echoing across the field. The ant in its earnestness pauses, perhaps wiping a bead of sweat from its brow, if ants could sweat. It looks at the grasshopper, perhaps with a hint of concern, but then shrugs its tiny shoulders and continues its arduous labor, driven by an innate understanding of future necessity. "Why do you toil so hard?" chirps the grasshopper. "Come join me in my merriment." The ant, ever practical, simply replies, "I am storing up food for the winter, lest I starve when the cold comes." The grasshopper merely laughs, twirls his antennae, and continues his tuneful neglect. As the summer days inevitably shorten and the crisp air of autumn bites, the landscape begins to transform. The grass withers, the leaves fall, and a chill permeates everything. The once bright sun offers little warmth. You observe the change through the eyes of the now shivering grasshopper, his lyre silent, his once plump body thin and weak from hunger. He's desperate, cold, and utterly unprepared. He finally drags himself to the ant's cozy, well-stocked burrow, rapping weakly on its tiny door. "Please, he begs. "I am starving. Can you spare some food?" The ant, snug amidst its piles of grain, opens its door, just a crack, its small eyes assessing the shivering creature. "What were you doing all summer?" it asks, its voice perhaps a little tired, a little resigned. "I was singing and dancing," chirps the grasshopper with a pathetic, hopeful smile. The ant, ever the pragmatist, simply shakes its head. "Well then," it says, closing the door softly but firmly, "if you sang all summer, you can dance all winter." It's a harsh lesson, isn't it? But undeniably effective. This isn't about cruelty. It's about natural consequences, about the reality that effort today often pays dividends tomorrow. As the grasshopper shivers alone in the stark reality of winter, you turn from the hard lesson of diligence to a tale that offers a warmer, more hopeful message about the unexpected power of compassion, the lion and the mouse. This fable teaches us that kindness, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, can yield immense and surprising rewards. Imagine a vast, sun-dappled forest in ancient Greece, the air filled with the rustling of leaves and the distant chirping of cicadas. You see a magnificent lion, the undisputed king of the jungle, sprawling majestically beneath a shady oak tree. His golden mane gleams in the sunlight, and he lets out a soft, rumbling snore deep in a midday nap. He looks utterly invincible, a force of nature. Then scurrying past his enormous paw, almost unseen, is a tiny, timid mouse, its whiskers twitching nervously. It's just trying to get from one patch of grass to another, a minuscule creature in a world dominated by giants. The mainstream historical fact here is that this fable is one of the most enduring stories about empathy and reciprocal altruism, taught for centuries to illustrate that even the most powerful can benefit from the weakest. It's a core narrative in the collection of fables attributed to Aesop. The quirk, however, lies in the sheer audacity of the mouse's plea. You might think, why would a mighty lion even bother with a tiny mouse? But when the mouse accidentally scurries over the lion's face, waking him with a startled roar, The mouse in its terrified moment actually begs for mercy, promising a future favor. Historians still argue whether fables like this were truly intended to teach complex moral lessons or if they primarily served as entertaining stories that also happened to reinforce existing social hierarchies by showing even the powerful needed help. Regardless, the mouse's courage is notable. You can almost hear the lion's earth-shaking roar as he traps the tiny creature beneath his massive paw. The mouse, trembling, squeaks out its plea, promising to repay the kindness someday. The lion, amused by such a ridiculous offer from such a small creature, lets out a booming laugh that echoes through the forest. "You a tiny mouse, help me!" He rumbles, a hint of genuine amusement in his voice. But perhaps because he was well-fed or simply found the idea charming, he lifts his paw and lets the mouse scurry away to safety. It's a moment of unexpected grace from a creature of immense power, a slight deviation from his usual predatory instincts. You might even feel a little relieved for the mouse whose tiny heart must have been pounding like a drum. Days turn into weeks. The forest continues its quiet life, oblivious to the brief encounter between predator and prey. Then one fateful afternoon, you hear a frantic, desperate roar echoing through the trees. The lion, once so invincible, has become ensnared in a hunter's net strung tightly between the trees. He thrashes, struggles, and roars with all his might, but the strong ropes hold him fast. His magnificent strength is useless against the cunning trap. You feel a pang of sympathy for the trapped king, his raw power humbled by simple human ingenuity. Suddenly, you see a small, familiar figure emerge from the undergrowth. It's the tiny mouse, its eyes bright with recognition. It remembers the lion's unexpected kindness. Without a moment's hesitation, the mouse sets to work, gnawing diligently at the thick ropes with its sharp little teeth. Gnaw, gnaw, gnaw. It's a painstaking process, but the mouse is persistent, driven by gratitude and a sense of purpose. Slowly, meticulously, one by one, the ropes begin to fray, then snap. You can almost hear the triumphant little squeak as the last rope gives way and the mighty lion is finally free, shaking his mane and gazing with profound respect at his tiny savior. It's a humbling moment for the king of the jungle, acknowledging the power that kindness can unlock even from the most unassuming source. As the grateful lion acknowledges his tiny rescuer, you are whisked away from the depths of the forest to a sun-drenched vineyard where a different kind of encounter is unfolding, one that speaks volumes about human nature and the art of self-deception. The Fox and the Grapes. This fable perfectly illustrates how we often rationalize our failures by devaluing what we couldn't achieve. Imagine a scorching hot day in ancient Greece, the kind where the air shimmers above the ground. You see a clever but rather hungry fox, his russet fur gleaming, trotting along a dusty path. His stomach rumbles with anticipation, for ahead of him, strung high on a trellis, are plump, juicy bunches of ripened grapes. They hang heavy and inviting, shimmering with a purple hue that promises sweet refreshment. He eyes them with intense longing, his mouth already watering at the thought of their succulence. The mainstream historical fact here is that this fable is the origin of the common idiom sour grapes, used to describe how someone dismisses something they couldn't attain as undesirable. It's a testament to the fable's enduring insight into human psychology. The quirk, however, lies in the fox's persistent, almost desperate attempts to reach the grapes before his eventual, very human-like rationalization. You might think, just get a stick, fella, but no, his methods are purely physical. Historians still argue whether fables like this were intended to teach a specific moral lesson about honesty and self-assessment, or simply to provide a humorous observation on the common human tendency to justify failure. Regardless, the fox's internal monologue is quite relatable. You can almost hear the soft thud as the fox leaps, stretches, and strains his lean body, coiling and uncoiling in midair. He jumps again and again, his paws scrabbling at the air, his jaws snapping tantalizingly close to the plump bunches, but always, always just out of reach. The sun beats down his tongue, lolls in sweat if foxes could sweat like us would be pouring off him. He is exhausted, frustrated, and increasingly desperate. The grapes, so close yet so agonizingly far, mock him with their tantalizing presence. He tries one more time, a mighty exasperated leap, but still his efforts are in vain. You might even feel a pang of sympathy for his futile struggle, recognizing the universal feeling of striving for something just beyond your grasp. Finally panting and defeated, the fox stops. He eyes the grapes one last time, no longer with longing, but with a sudden feigned disdain. He turns his nose up, lets out a dismissive huff, and begins to walk away, his tail held high, as if he never truly wanted them. "Humph," he mutters to himself, loud enough for any passing bird to hear. "Those grapes are clearly sour. I wouldn't touch them, even if they fell into my mouth." He says it with such conviction, you almost believe him. But you saw the longing in his eyes, didn't you? You know the truth of his frustration. This fable isn't just about a fox and some fruit. It's a profound commentary on human psychology, on our innate tendency to protect our egos when faced with unattainable desires. It teaches us about the often unconscious process of yours rationalization, where we convince ourselves that something we failed to achieve wasn't worth having in the first place. It's a mechanism we all employ, whether it's the job we didn't get, the vacation we couldn't afford, or the last slice of cake we missed. The scorching sun, the fox's heaving breaths, the dismissive sniff. These are the subtle sensory details that bring this timeless lesson to life. You, the silent observer, might even find yourself chuckling, softly recognizing a little bit of that fox in yourself, and perhaps vowing to be a bit more honest about your own sour grapes moments. From the frustrated leaps of the fox, your journey through the fabled landscapes now takes you to a different kind of race, one that teaches the profound power of quiet determination. The tortoise and the hare. This isn't just a story about mismatched opponents. It's a timeless testament to steady perseverance, triumphing over arrogant speed and overconfidence. Imagine a bright, clear day in the ancient Greek countryside, the sun warming your skin, a gentle breeze rustling through the olive trees. You see a boastful hare, his long ears twitching, his powerful hind legs itching to dart across the field. He's full of himself, quick and agile, and he knows it. Nearby, moving with a ponderous, steady gait, is a humble tortoise, his ancient shell a mosaic of browns and greens. He's slow, deliberate, and utterly without flashy pretensions. The hare, full of youthful exuberance and a dash of condescension, challenges the tortoise to a race. You might think, well, that's hardly fair, and you'd be right on the surface. The mainstream historical fact here is that this fable is perhaps the most universally recognized allegory for the moral, slow and steady wins the race, a fundamental lesson about the virtues of perseverance and humility. It's a cornerstone of moral education across countless cultures. The quirk, however, lies in the hare's almost unbelievable overconfidence and complacency. You might just want to yell, "Don't fall asleep, you idiot," but he does, doesn't he? Historians still argue whether the apparent simplicity of fables like this belies a deeper philosophical commentary on the nature of virtue and human character, or if they were primarily mnemonic devices to easily convey moral lessons. Regardless, the hare's arrogance is perfectly captured. You can almost hear the hare's impatient foot thumping a silent challenge. When the race begins, you hear the swift thump, thump, thump of the hare's powerful legs as he streaks away, a blur of brown fur against the green. He's gone in a flash, leaving the tortoise far behind, moving at his usual unhurried pace. The tortoise simply sets off, one deliberate step after another, his focus entirely on the finish line miles away. He doesn't glance back, doesn't fret about the hare's speed. He just keeps moving. You might feel a little surge of admiration for the tortoise's unwavering focus, even if you're internally rolling your eyes at the hare's bravado. The hare, meanwhile, confident in his inevitable victory, decides he has plenty of time for a nap. He finds a soft patch of moss beneath a shady tree, yawns widely, and settles down quickly, drifting into a deep, peaceful sleep. You can almost hear his soft, rhythmic snores, completely oblivious to the passage of time. He dreams of winning, perhaps of glory and accolades, while the very race he's so sure of winning continues without him. It's a classic case of counting your chickens before they hatch, or in this case, celebrating victory before you've even crossed the finish line. Hours pass. The sun moves across the sky, casting longer shadows. The hare remains deep in slumber. Meanwhile, you observe the tortoise still plodding along, slowly but surely. Each step is identical to the last, each movement deliberate. He never deviates, never stops, never loses sight of his goal. You can almost hear the soft, scrape of his shell against the occasional pebble, a tiny determined sound in the vast quiet of the afternoon. Finally, as the sun begins to dip low, the tortoise, with a final steady push, crosses the finish line. Just moments later, the hare wakes with a start, stretches yawns, and then remembering the race bolts towards the finish. But it's too late. He sees the tortoise calmly resting, having already won. It's a harsh, humbling lesson about the dangers of overconfidence and the quiet power of unwavering effort. From the humble victory of the tortoise, you turn to a tale that warns against the perils of dishonesty and the irreparable damage to trust. The Boy Who Cried Wolf. This fable is a stark reminder that deceit, even when playful, can have devastating and irreversible consequences. Imagine a sun-drenched hillside in ancient Greece dotted with grazing sheep, their wool shimmering in the warmth. You see a young shepherd boy, perhaps a bit bored with his solitary task, lounging under an olive tree, his staff propped beside him. His job is simple: watch the sheep and cry, "Wolf," if danger truly approaches. The mainstream historical fact here is that this fable is a universal cautionary tale about the loss of credibility when one repeatedly fabricates a crisis. It's so ingrained in Western culture that crying wolf is an idiom understood across countless languages and generations. The quirk, however, lies in the sheer, almost childish delight the boy takes in his mischievous deception. You might think, doesn't he realize the gravity of his actions? But no, his initial motivations seem to stem from pure boredom and a desire for attention. He finds it amusing to trick the villagers. Historians still argue whether fables like this were designed purely to teach a moral lesson, or if they also served as a subtle commentary on the dangers of social disruption, even from seemingly minor acts of dishonesty. Regardless, the boy's actions are a clear breach of trust. You can almost hear the boy's eager shouts echoing across the quiet valley. "Wolf, wolf." Then the frantic pounding of feet as the villagers, armed with pitchforks and clubs, rush up the hill, their faces etched with concern. You might feel a flicker of sympathy for their genuine alarm, only to see it quickly turn to exasperation as they find no wolf, just a giggling boy. "There's no wolf!" he cries, wiping tears of mirth from his eyes. The villagers, annoyed but relieved, grumble and trudge back down the hill. This isn't just a one-time prank, it becomes a pattern. He does it again and again, enjoying the brief thrill of their panicked response, the fleeting attention. Each false alarm chips away at their willingness to believe him. Days pass. The sun continues its journey across the sky. The sheep graze peacefully, oblivious to the boy's dangerous game. Then one terrifying afternoon, you hear a real cry, a genuinely desperate, fear-filled shout that chills you to the bone. "Wolf, wolf, the wolf is really here." This time there's no mirth, only raw terror in the boy's voice. As you see a large gray wolf, its eyes gleaming, actually lunging at the flock, scattering the sheep in panic. The boy screams, genuinely terrified, pointing frantically. But as you look down at the village, you notice something different. The villagers, hearing his cries, merely sigh, shaking their heads. "He's crying wolf again," you hear one mutter, turning back to their chores. "Let him learn his lesson," another says with a shrug. The frantic pounding of feet is absent this time. No pitchforks, no clubs, just the chilling, profound silence of disbelief. You witness the devastating consequence of his repeated dishonesty. His voice, once capable of summoning help, now falls on deaf ears. The wolf, unimpeded, carries off a lamb, leaving the boy weeping amongst his frightened, diminished flock. It's a brutal, unforgettable lesson about the precious, fragile nature of worn trust. Once broken, it is incredibly difficult, sometimes impossible to mend. From the chilling silence of lost trust, you move to a tale that celebrates intellect and problem-solving, even when faced with seemingly insurmountable obstacles. The Crow and the Pitcher. This fable is a brilliant illustration of how ingenuity and perseverance can triumph over brute strength or simple frustration. Imagine a scorching hot day in ancient Greece. the sun beating down mercilessly, baking the earth dry. You see a parched crow. Its feathers ruffled, its beak open slightly as it gasped for air. It's desperate for a drink, its throat aching with thirst. Then its sharp eyes spotted a pitcher sitting on the ground seemingly full of water. A glimmer of hope quickly followed by a pang of frustration because the water level is too low for its beak to reach. You might feel a surge of shared exasperation recognizing that frustrating moment when something you desperately need is just out of reach. The mainstream historical fact here is that this fable is a classic example of animal intelligence, in fables showcasing problem solving through indirect means rather than brute force. It's a testament to the idea that where there's a will, there's a way, even for a bird. The quirk, however, lies in the crow's immediate recognition of the problem and its surprisingly sophisticated, almost scientific approach to solving it. You might think most birds would just give up and fly away, but this crow is different. Historians still argue whether fables like this were based on genuine observations of animal behavior. Crows are indeed remarkably intelligent, or if they were purely imaginative, constructions designed to illustrate human virtues like cleverness and persistence. Regardless, the crow's brilliance shines through. You can almost hear the crow's frustrated caws, a low guttural sound of desperation. It tries everything obvious, craning its neck, tipping the pitcher. It's too heavy, even trying to break it open. Its beak isn't strong enough. It paces around the pitcher, its small, intelligent eyes darting from the water to its surroundings, clearly thinking, analyzing the situation. You might observe its head cocked to one side, a moment of profound concentration, then a spark of insight. Its gaze falls upon the small pebbles scattered nearby. A light bulb moment if crows had light bulbs, you know. With renewed determination, the crow begins its ingenious plan. You hear the soft plink as it drops the first pebble into the pitcher. The water level doesn't seem to move. Plink. Another pebble. Still nothing obvious. But the crow doesn't give up. It tirelessly picks up one pebble after another, carrying them in its beak, dropping them plink, plink, plink into the pitcher. It's a slow, painstaking process requiring immense patience and an understanding of displacement that would impress a modern physicist. You can almost feel the crow's focused determination, its singular purpose in overcoming this obstacle. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the water level begins to rise. A tiny ripple, then another, as each pebble displaces a small amount of liquid. The crow continues unwavering in its task, its thirst providing an unyielding motivation. Finally, after countless plinks and an impressive display of feathered engineering, the water reaches the brim. You hear the satisfying slurp, slurp, slurp. As the crow finally drinks its fill, its thirst quenched by its own cleverness and persistence. It's a triumphant moment, a quiet victory for intellect over adversity. This fable reminds us that problems often require creative solutions, that brute force isn't always the answer, and that sometimes the simplest tools used ingeniously can solve the most complex challenges. You, the silent observer, might even find yourself inspired to look at your own problems with a fresh, more resourceful eye, remembering the crow and its pebbles. From the clever crow's resourceful victory, you are now transported to a more ethereal landscape, where natural forces take on human qualities to teach a powerful lesson about persuasion versus force. The north wind and the sun. This fable beautifully illustrates that gentle persuasion often achieves more than brute strength or coercion. Imagine a vast open landscape in ancient Greece, perhaps a wide plain where the wind sweeps unimpeded. You feel the biting chill of the north wind, unseen but undeniably present, swirling around you, tugging at your clothes, making you shiver. Its breath is cold, its demeanor blustery and boastful. High above, serene and radiant, hangs the benevolent sun, its golden rays attempting to warm the earth. They are locked in a silent contest, each convinced of its own superior power to influence. You might instinctively pull your cloak tighter, feeling the raw power of the wind. The mainstream historical fact here is that this fable is a classic allegory for the idea that gentleness and kindness are more effective than violence or coercion, a moral that has resonated across cultures and philosophical traditions. It's a testament to the enduring human debate about the best way to lead or influence. The quirk, however, lies in the human-like arrogance of the north wind, convinced that sheer force will always prevail. You might think, doesn't the wind know how annoying it is? But no, it's utterly self-assured in its bluster. Historians still argue whether fables like this were primarily designed to offer practical advice on human interaction or to subtly critique authoritarian leadership styles common in ancient societies. Regardless, the message is clear and soft. You can almost hear the north wind's loud, boastful howl, a mighty whoosh that whips through the air, sending dust swirling and leaves scattering. He spots a lone traveler trudging along a winding road wrapped tightly in a heavy cloak. "Ha!" bellows the north wind, his voice a chilling gust. "I bet I can make that traveler take off his cloak faster than you can, son." The sun, calm and smiling, gently replies with quiet confidence. "We shall see. I say gentleness will win the day." It's a classic power struggle, albeit a very philosophical one. You might even feel a little bit like the traveler caught in the middle of this cosmic bet. The north wind, eager to prove his point, unleashes his full fury. You feel the gale-force winds buffet you, tearing at your clothing, stinging your eyes with dust. The traveler, struggling against the relentless assault, merely clutches his cloak tighter around him, hunching his shoulders against the onslaught. The more the wind blows, the harder the traveler clings to his garment, desperate for warmth and protection. You can almost hear the frantic flapping of the cloak, the grunts of the struggling traveler, and the frustrated huffs of the north wind. The harder the wind tries, the less successful he becomes. It's a clear demonstration of brute force meeting stubborn resistance. Finally exhausted and defeated, the north wind gives up, huffing a final exasperated sigh. Now it is the sun's turn. Slowly, gently, the sun begins to shine. You feel its warmth spread across the landscape, soft and comforting, melting away the chill. The traveler, feeling the pleasant heat, gradually loosens his grip on his cloak. As the sun's rays grow warmer, becoming truly hot, the traveler begins to perspire. With a relieved sigh, he finally shrugs off his heavy cloak and stretches, enjoying the pleasant warmth. You might even feel a pleasant warmth spreading through you, a sensation of relief and comfort. It's a perfect illustration, the same objective achieved with radically different methods. The sun's quiet persuasion achieved what the wind's raw forces could not. It's a timeless lesson about influence, reminding us that often a gentle touch and a warm smile can achieve far more than any amount of shouting or pushing. From the subtle power of persuasion, you now return to the more direct yet equally profound lesson about honesty and the dangerous consequences of deceit, reiterating a familiar theme. The Shepherd Boy and the Wolf. This tale, a variation on a previous one, reinforces the critical importance of truthfulness and the devastating impact of lost trust. Imagine once again that sun-drenched hillside in ancient Greece, the air warm and still. You see a shepherd boy lounging idly amongst his flock of grazing sheep. He's bored perhaps with the monotony of his day. His mind, restless and mischievous, begins to ponder a way to inject some excitement into the quiet afternoon. He thinks of the villagers toiling in the fields below, and a mischievous glint appears in his eye. The mainstream historical fact here is that stories about the consequences of deceit, particularly those involving a boy, a flock, and a wolf, are among the most persistent and universally known moral fables across cultures. They highlight the societal value placed on honesty and the dangers of eroding community trust. The quirk, however, lies in the sheer brazenness of the boy's repeat offenses and his short-sighted inability to foresee the inevitable chilling outcome. You might think, didn't he learn the first time? But boredom and perhaps a touch of youthful arrogance seems to override any lessons learned. Historians still argue whether the repetition of similar fables like this one and The Boy Who Cried Wolf indicates variations of an original oral tradition, or if they speak to the fundamental human tendency to repeat mistakes. Regardless, the core message remains a stark warning. You can almost hear the boy's gleeful shout echoing across the valley. "Wolf, wolf, a wolf is attacking the sheep." Then the familiar sounds begin, the distant shouts of the villagers, the quickening pace of their footsteps as they drop their tools and rush up the hill, their faces contorted with urgency and concern. You might feel a flicker of apprehension for their wasted effort, knowing what's coming. They arrive breathless and ready to confront the beast, only to find the boy laughing doubled over with mirth. "Ha, there's no wolf, you fools, I tricked you," he cries, wiping tears of amusement from his eyes. The villagers once again exchange exasperated glances, grumble their displeasure, and trudge back down the hill, their trust in him chipped away piece by painful piece. This isn't just an isolated incident. It becomes a pattern, a repeated betrayal of the villagers' goodwill. Days turn into weeks. The sun continues its slow arc across the sky. The boy, perhaps emboldened by his perceived cleverness, repeats his dangerous prank. Each time the villagers respond with less urgency, their belief in his cries dwindling. Then one terrifying afternoon, a truly horrifying sound cuts through the peace of the hillside. A desperate, raw scream filled with genuine terror. "Wolf, wolf. The wolf is here. Help me. It's real this time." This is not the sound of mischievous laughter. It's the guttural shriek of a child facing true mortal danger. You see a large gray wolf, its eyes glinting with hunger, indeed tearing into the helpless flock, scattering the sheep in panicked disarray. The boy screams, pointing frantically at the real, undeniable threat. He pleads, he begs, his voice cracking with desperation. But as you glance towards the village, you see only the quiet, unmoving figures of the villagers. They hear his cries, but they are unmoved. "He's just playing his games again." You hear one weary voice sigh. "Let him deal with it himself." Another mutters, turning back to their work. The sound of their footsteps rushing to help is conspicuously absent. You witness the horrifying climax of his deceit, his credibility utterly destroyed, his desperate pleas ignored. The wolf, unimpeded, continues its brutal feast, leaving the boy weeping bitter tears of regret amidst his ruined flock, learning too late that honesty is the most valuable currency, and that a reputation for truthfulness once squandered is almost impossible to regain. From the chilling consequences of dishonesty, you now embark on a delightful journey that explores contrasting lifestyles and the true meaning of contentment. The town mouse and the country mouse. This fable beautifully illustrates that what one person considers luxury, another might find a terrifying ordeal, and that peace of mind often outweighs material wealth. Imagine two very different homes in ancient Greece separated by miles but united by kinship. First, you find yourself in the bustling, crowded streets of a Greek hot town. Perhaps Athens, filled with the clamor of carts, the shouts of merchants, and the incessant hum of human activity. You see a plump, well-fed town mouse, its fur sleek, darting expertly between crowded market stalls, nibbling on fallen crumbs of cheese and bread. Its home, though luxurious in its abundance of food, is a constant hubbub of noise and danger, located in a grand house, perhaps in the very pantry. The mainstream historical fact here is that this fable is a timeless allegory for the contrast between urban and rural life, and the different values associated with each, a theme common in literature across many eras. It highlights the eternal human debate about the ideal place to live. The quirk, however, lies in the specific descriptions of both mice's initial bliss and subsequent horror at each other's lifestyles. You might think, surely they'd see the trade-offs immediately, but no, each is convinced their own way is superior until truly experiencing the other. Historians still argue whether fables like this were purely didactic, teaching contentment, or if they also subtly commented on social class and the different experiences of rich and poor, urban and rural populations. Regardless, the stark contrast is compelling. You can almost hear the soft, scritch or scratch of the town mouse's tiny paws on polished marble floors, the distant muffled laughter from human voices, and the constant threat of a swinging broom or a hungry cat. He dines on rich delicacies, often leftovers from lavish banquets, bits of roasted meat, fine pastries, and aged cheeses. His days are a constant feast, but also a constant game of dodge and weave, a high-stakes scavenger hunt. You might feel a pang of admiration for his agility, but also a shiver of anxiety at the ever-present danger. Then you are whisked away to the serene, quiet countryside. The air is fresh, scented with wildflowers and damp earth. You see a leaner, perhaps slightly more cautious, country mouse, its fur a bit rougher but its eyes bright and alert. Its home is a simple, cozy burrow beneath a gnarled olive tree, filled with carefully gathered nuts, roots, and wild berries. Its days are peaceful, filled with the sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves, but the food is humble and sometimes scarce. The town mouse, eager to impress, invites his country cousin for a visit. You observe the country mouse's initial wonder at the abundance of food in the townhouse, its eyes wide at the sight of such delicacies. But soon the terror begins. You hear the sudden thud of a closing door, the terrified squeak of the country mouse as it narrowly avoids a human foot, the frantic pat, pat, pat of its tiny heart as it hides from a sleek predatory cat. It's a world of constant near-death experiences. After a night of endless fear and frantic hiding, the country mouse, pale and trembling, declares, "Give me my nuts and berries in peace, rather than your delicacies with such terror." Then the country mouse in turn invites the town mouse to his rustic abode. You see the town mouse's initial disdain for the simple food and the quiet, uneventful days. But as night falls and the peace of the burrow settles, he experiences something he rarely knows in town: true, undisturbed peace. No sudden noises, no looming threats, just the gentle sounds of the countryside. He realizes that a full belly is nothing if your heart is always pounding with fear. The rustle of a leaf becomes a soothing lullaby, not a sign of impending doom. It's a profound revelation. This fable reminds us that contentment is subjective, and what one person values most, be it abundance or peace, is deeply personal. It speaks to the eternal human struggle to define the good life. It's a gentle lesson in appreciating what you have, even if it seems humble, especially when contrasted with the anxious luxury of another. You, the silent observer, might even find yourself pondering your own definitions of wealth and happiness, wondering if your own town mouse existence truly brings you more joy than a simpler country mouse life might. From the peaceful contemplation of contrasting lifestyles, you now turn to a fable that delves into the intricacies of revenge, fairness, and the surprising mirror of your own actions. The Fox and the Stork. This isn't just a tale of two animals. It's a clever lesson about reciprocal trickery and the importance of empathy in social interactions. Imagine a charming, sun-drenched clearing in ancient Greece, perhaps by a gentle stream, where a cunning fox, with a mischievous glint in his eye, invites a stately stork to dinner. The fox, known for his trickery, grins inwardly, already anticipating his clever prank. The stork, elegant and graceful with her long legs and even longer beak, accepts the invitation with polite curiosity, unaware of the impending culinary joke. You might feel a slight sense of foreboding, knowing a fox is involved as you observe their initial pleasantries. The mainstream historical fact here is that this fable is a classic example of tit-for-tat revenge, where a character's trickery is turned back on them, teaching a clear moral about treating others as you wish to be treated. It's a fundamental narrative in Aesop's collection, widely used to illustrate the principle of reciprocity. The quirk, however, lies in the fox's almost gleeful anticipation of his own cleverness, completely blind to the possibility of being outsmarted himself. You might think, doesn't he realize this could backfire? But no, his arrogance blinds him to potential consequences. Historians still argue whether fables like this were intended purely to teach a moral lesson about fair play, or if they also served as a subtle commentary on social justice, showing how even the wrong can find ways to exact retribution. Regardless, the humor is undeniable. You can almost hear the fox's polite yet secretly smug invitation, "My dear stork, pray join me for a delightful supper." The stork's graceful nod, her long neck bending elegantly. At the appointed time, you observe the stork arriving at the fox's cozy den. The table is set, and the fox proudly presents the first course, a delicious-smelling soup, but served in a wide, flat dish. You hear the fox enthusiastically lapping up the soup with his broad tongue, a contented slurp, slurp, slurp. The poor stork, however, can only dip the very tip of her long, narrow beak into the shallow liquid. She tries tap, 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 but can barely get a drop. She attempts to scoop it, but it just runs off. You might feel a pang of sympathy for her frustration watching her elegant attempts at an impossible meal. The fox, meanwhile, watches her struggles with thinly veiled amusement, barely suppressing his chuckles. The stork, maintaining her composure, politely thanks the fox for the meal, concealing her hunger and humiliation. But a few days later, she extends an invitation of her own. "My dear fox," she says, her voice as smooth as silk, "I would be delighted if you would join me for dinner at my humble abode." The fox, sensing no danger and perhaps anticipating another opportunity for mischief, eagerly accepts. You follow the fox as he trots confidently to the stork's nest. This time the table is set with equally delicious-smelling food, but served in a tall, narrow-necked jar. You hear the stork with effortless grace, dipping her long, slender beak deep into the jar, happily sipping the contents with a contented slurp, slurp, slurp. The fox, however, can only sniff at the opening of the jar, his broad muzzle completely unable to fit. He paces around the jar, his tail twitching in frustration, trying to tilt it to reach inside with his paw, but all his efforts are in vain. You can almost hear his exasperated huffs, his silent grumbles of defeat as he watches the stork enjoy her meal with serene satisfaction, offering him nothing but a polite, knowing smile. It's a taste of his own medicine, isn't it? A perfectly executed poetic justice. This fable reminds us that empathy and fair play are essential in social interactions. It teaches us about the consequences of deceit and the satisfying irony of having your own tricks turned against you. It's a playful yet profound lesson in reciprocity, illustrating that true friendship and respectful relations are built on mutual consideration, not clever humiliation. You, the silent observer, might even find yourself chuckling at the fox's well-deserved comeuppance, and perhaps vowing to always consider how your actions might feel from another's perspective, especially when it comes to dinner party pranks. From the well-deserved comeuppance of the tricky fox, you journey to a fable that explores a universal human folly, the danger of trying to please everyone, and the wisdom of trusting your own judgment. This is the tale of the miller, his son, and the donkey. Goody. It's a hilarious yet insightful look at how external opinions can lead to utter absurdity. Imagine a dusty road in ancient Greece winding its way through sun-drenched fields. You see an old Manowari miller, his beard grizzled, his face kindly, leading his trusty a donkey. Beside him walks his young, energetic Arrowswinder's son. They are on their way to market to sell the donkey, a simple task that seems straightforward enough. But soon their journey becomes a comical lesson in the futility of seeking universal approval. The mainstream historical fact here is that this fable is a classic narrative illustrating the impossibility of satisfying everyone, and the wisdom of maintaining one's own course, a lesson that has echoed through philosophy and common wisdom for millennia. It's a timeless commentary on public opinion and self-reliance. The quirk, however, lies in the sheer escalating absurdity of the advice offered by the passers-by and the miller's increasingly desperate attempts to follow it, even when it becomes utterly ridiculous. You might think, surely they'll stop when they look completely daft. But no, the fear of judgment drives them on. Historians still argue whether fables like this were intended to teach humility and self-reliance, or if they also served as a subtle critique of societal pressure and conformity. Regardless, the humor is undeniable. You can almost hear the gentle clop, clop, clop of the donkey's hooves on the dirt road, a peaceful sound soon interrupted. The first passer-by they encounter, a group of chattering women, cast disapproving glances. "Look at those lazy louts," you hear one whisper, "riding while the poor old man and his boy walk." The miller, eager to avoid criticism, immediately hoists his son onto the donkey's back. You might feel a flicker of sympathy for his desire to be seen as good. They continue on only to meet a group of stern-faced merchants. "Humph," one snorts. "Look at the disrespectful boy riding while his elderly father walks." The miller, again wanting to do right, makes his son dismount. He climbs onto the donkey himself, leaving his son to walk alongside. You can almost hear the miller's sigh of relief, thinking he's finally got it right. But the journey is not over. Next, they encounter some bustling travelers. "For shame," one cries out. "The poor old man rides while his young, strong son has to walk." The miller, exasperated but still determined to please, dismounts. After a moment's thought, he and his son decide to both ride the donkey. You might feel a pang of weariness for them, recognizing the exhausting treadmill of trying to satisfy contradictory demands. They haven't gone far before they meet a group of concerned farmers. "Oh dear me," one exclaims, That poor donkey, he's far too small to carry two full-grown people. You'll wear him out before you even get to market. The miller, now at his wit's end, looks at his son, then at the donkey, then back at his son. There's a moment of profound comedic despair. What to do? Then in a stroke of utter ludicrous genius born of desperation, they decide to carry the donkey. You watch incredulous as the miller and his son tie the donkey's legs to a pole and, straining with effort, lift the poor bewildered creature onto their shoulders. The donkey, looking utterly confused and rather undignified, hangs upside down as they trudge along. You can almost hear the collective gasp of disbelief from the onlookers, followed by uncontrolled laughter. It's a truly absurd sight born entirely from their desire to avoid any and all criticism. As they cross a bridge, the donkey, perhaps startled or simply fed up, struggles, breaks free, and plunges into the river, being carried away by the current. The miller and his son are left with nothing but a pole and a profound lesson. This fable reminds us that true wisdom lies in knowing your own mind, understanding your purpose, and not allowing the fickle winds of public opinion to sway you from a sensible path. It teaches us about the folly of people-pleasing and the importance of self-reliance or in judgment, the sounds of shifting criticisms, the grunts of exertion, the final splash. These are the indelible marks of a hilarious yet deeply insightful lesson. You, the silent observer, might find yourself chuckling at their misfortune and perhaps vowing to trust your own gut instinct a little more, even if it means raising a few eyebrows. From the splashing absurdity of the miller's donkey, you turn to a fable that offers a stark warning about appearances and the inevitable unmasking of deceit, The Donkey in the Lion's Skin. This tale brilliantly illustrates that false pretenses, no matter how convincing, cannot hide one's true nature forever. Imagine a dusty, sun-baked landscape in ancient Greece, perhaps near a village where shepherds tend their flocks. You see a rather ordinary donkey. Its ears long, its bray a familiar, unthreatening sound. It's a creature of humble utility, known for its stubbornness, but otherwise harmless. Then you see it don an unexpected disguise, a magnificent lion's skin. Discarded by a hunter, its golden fur and fearsome mane making the donkey appear utterly transformed. The donkey, filled with a newfound sense of power, parades around enjoying the terror it inspires. The mainstream historical fact here is that this fable is a classic and widely recognized allegory for hypocrisy and the dangers of attempting to deceive others by assuming a false identity or showing off qualities one does not possess. It's a timeless reminder that superficial appearances can be misleading. The quirk, however, lies in the donkey's seemingly complete conviction in its own disguise, believing that its outward appearance is enough to fool everyone, including its natural predators. You might think, surely it can't be that convincing, but for a time it works. Historians still argue whether fables like this were intended purely to teach children about honesty, or if they also served as a subtle critique of political figures who adopted grand but false personas to gain power. Regardless, the donkey's hubris is palpable. You can almost hear the soft rustle of the lion's skin as the donkey awkwardly shuffles into it, then the sudden terrified bleating of sheep as they scatter in panic, convinced a true predator is among them. The shepherds, too, initially recoil in fear, their faces draining of color. The donkey, enjoying the chaos, lets out a triumphant bray, which of course sounds nothing like a lion's roar. You might feel a flicker of amusement at the comical dissonance, the proud donkey completely unaware that its true voice betrays its grand disguise. For a short while, the donkey revels in its newfound authority. It wanders into the forest, and even the smaller, more timid animals flee in terror, convinced they've stumbled upon a formidable predator. It's a fleeting moment of unearned respect built entirely on a flimsy facade. You can almost see the donkey puffing out its chest as much as a donkey in a lion's skin can puff its ears, twitching with satisfaction. It enjoys the power of fear, a novelty for such a humble creature. But as with all deceit, the truth inevitably comes out. Perhaps a sharp-eyed shepherd, recovering from his initial fright, notices something amiss. The familiar bray that sounds more like a donkey than a lion, or perhaps the way the lion grazes on thistles rather than hunting prey. Or, as in some versions, the donkey in its arrogance cannot resist letting out a triumphant but very unlion-like bray. You hear the unmistakable hee-haw that rips through the silence, shattering the illusion. The moment the true sound escapes its throat, the deception is revealed. The sheep stop scattering, the shepherds drop their staffs in exasperated recognition, and the other forest animals, realizing their mistake, begin to laugh. The fable ends with the donkey stripped of its borrowed grandeur, exposed for what it truly is, a common ass. The moral is clear. Appearances can be deceiving, but they are never absolute. One's true nature eventually will always reveal itself, no matter how elaborate the disguise. It's a reminder that authenticity is far more valuable than fleeting imitation, and that trying to be something you're not often leads to humiliation. You, the silent observer, might find yourself nodding sagely, recognizing the enduring lesson that true character, not costume, defines a being. From the embarrassing unmasking of the donkey, you are now led to a fable that offers a blunt, timeless warning about the destructive nature of avarice. The goose that laid the golden eggs. This isn't just a tale of a fortunate bird. It's a stark commentary on greed and the folly of sacrificing long-term prosperity for immediate unsustainable gain. Imagine a rustic, sun-dappled farmyard in ancient Greece, filled with the gentle sounds of clucking chickens and contented pigs. You see a poor farmer, his clothes worn, his face etched with the worries of daily survival. His days are a constant struggle, his existence precarious. Then a miracle occurs among his flock of ordinary geese. One particular goose begins to lay not an ordinary egg, but a gleaming, perfectly formed golden egg. Every single day, you might feel a surge of incredulous wonder, imagining the sheer disbelief and then elation that would sweep over the farmer. The mainstream historical fact here is that this fable is the quintessential cautionary tale about greed, often cited with the idiom, killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. It's a foundational narrative in the collection attributed to Aesop, used to teach prudence and the dangers of insatiable desire. The quirk, however, lies in the farmer's rapid descent from humble gratitude to destructive impatience. You might think, one golden egg a day, that's already incredibly wealthy, why would he risk it? But the lure of instant, massive riches proves too strong. Historians still argue whether fables like this were intended to teach specific economic lessons about sustainable resources or primarily served as moral warnings against the vice of greed in general. Regardless, the farmer's escalating avarice is painfully clear. You can almost hear the farmer's excited gasp as he first discovers the glistening golden egg. The initial joy, the quiet astonishment, the growing realization of his incredible fortune. Each morning he rushes to the nest, his heart pounding with anticipation, only to find another perfect, precious golden egg. He grows rich, his farm flourishes, and his worries begin to dissipate. He buys new clothes, better tools, and perhaps even a larger house. You might feel a pang of happiness for his newfound prosperity, a sense of satisfaction that good fortune has finally come to him. But then a subtle shift begins. The farmer, now accustomed to his daily golden windfall, starts to become impatient. One egg a day, no matter how valuable, suddenly seems too slow. Why wait for daily increments when he could have all the gold at once? His mind, consumed by avarice, concocts a terrible, foolish plan. He becomes convinced that the goose must be full of golden treasure, a hidden hoard of solid gold within its very being. If only he could get it all at once, he thinks he would be truly, instantly rich beyond imagination. One morning, driven by this insatiable greed, the farmer, with a grim determination, takes a sharp knife. You hear the terrified squawk of the goose, a sound of betrayal and fear as he seizes it. With a swift, misguided cut, he opens the bird, expecting a glittering cascade of gold. Instead, there is only flesh, bones, and blood. No hidden treasure, no massive golden hoard. Just the sad, lifeless body of an ordinary goose, and the devastating realization that he has destroyed his source of unimaginable wealth. The golden eggs stop forever. He is left with nothing but a dead bird, his own foolish greed, and the bitter taste of ruin. It's a brutal, immediate consequence. This fable reminds us that impatience and insatiable greed are destructive forces. It teaches us to value sustained, steady prosperity over the fleeting illusion of instant riches, and warns against the folly of destroying the very source of your blessings. It's a profound lesson in long-term thinking versus short-sighted avarice. The gentle cluck of the goose, the sharp glint of the knife, the chilling silence that follows. These are the indelible marks of a tale that echoes down through the ages, urging us to recognize when enough is truly enough. You, the silent observer, might feel a deep pang of sorrow for the lost opportunity and a renewed appreciation for the steady, consistent blessings in your own life. From the tragic folly of the goose and its golden eggs, you turn to a fable that offers a biting critique of selfishness and the inability to share. The Dog in the Manger. This isn't just a story about an uncooperative canine. It's a timeless illustration of how some beings selfishly prevent others from enjoying what they themselves cannot use or appreciate. Imagine a rustic stable in ancient Greece, perhaps smelling faintly of hay and wood. You see a large, rather surly dog, not a farm dog, in the best of moods, lying possessively in a manger, filled with fresh, sweet-smelling hay. The manger, as you know, is designed to hold food for livestock. The dog, despite having no appetite for hay himself, guards it with a fierce territorial growl, snapping at anyone who comes near. The mainstream historical fact here is that this fable is the origin of the common idiom, dog in the manger, used to describe someone who spitefully hoards something they cannot use simply to prevent others from benefiting. It's a powerful and widely understood metaphor for selfishness. The quirk, however, lies in the sheer illogicality of the dog's behavior. You might think, why would a dog want hay? It's not food, but his possessiveness overrides any sense of reason or generosity. Historians still argue whether fables like this were primarily designed to teach children about sharing, or if they also served as a subtle critique of hoarding and exclusionary behavior among the wealthy or powerful in ancient societies. Regardless, the dog's malice is undeniable. You can almost hear the low rumbling growl of the dog, a menacing sound that warns off any approach. Then the rhythmic chewing sounds of hungry oxen approach, their large, gentle eyes filled with longing as they look at the fresh hay. These are hard-working animals, tired from their day in the fields, desperate for their evening meal. They shuffle closer, their hooves, clop, clop, clopping, softly on the stable floor, their nostrils flaring as they inhale the tempting scent of the hay. But as soon as one of them stretches its neck towards the manger, the dog unleashes a furious bark, snapping its teeth and baring its fangs. The oxen, bewildered and disappointed, back away, their large, patient eyes reflecting confusion. They can't understand why the dog, who clearly doesn't eat hay, would prevent them from their sustenance. They try again cautiously, hoping the dog will relent, perhaps moving to a different spot. But no, the dog merely reestablishes its position, its growl deepening, its body rigid with territorial stubbornness. It seems to take a perverse pleasure in denying them access to something it has no use for itself. You might feel a surge of frustration recognizing the unfairness of this situation, the sheer pointlessness of such a selfish act. The sun sets, casting long shadows across the stable. The oxen remain hungry, their bellies empty, all because of the dog's irrational possessiveness. The hay remains untouched, neither consumed by the dog nor shared with those who desperately need it. It's a stark image of wasted resources and unnecessary suffering born purely from selfishness and spite. This fable reminds us that true generosity is not just about giving what you don't want, but about not preventing others from what they need, especially when it costs you nothing. It teaches us a potent lesson about the destructive nature of envy and spite, and the fundamental injustice of hoarding resources purely to deny them to others. The frustrated snorts of the hungry oxen, the relentless, unnecessary barking of the dog, the quiet, almost suffocating presence of untouched hay. These are the indelible marks of a tale that echoes through time, urging us to consider the impact of our own selfish acts and to remember that not all treasures are meant to be hoarded. You, the silent observer, might feel a flash of recognition for this unpleasant trait in human behavior, and perhaps a resolve to never be the dog in the manger yourself. From the selfish growl of the dog in the manger, you are now led to a fable that offers a chilling warning about the deceptive nature of appearances and the hidden dangers of malicious intent. The Wolf in Sheep's Clothing. This isn't just a story about a clever disguise. It's a timeless illustration of how evil can conceal itself behind a facade of innocence to achieve its sinister aims. Imagine a peaceful green pasture in ancient Greece where fluffy, innocent sheep graze contentedly under the warm sun. The air is soft, filled with the gentle baa-ing of the flock and the distant chirping of birds. Suddenly, a new figure appears among them, a seemingly harmless sheep, its wool as white and soft as the rest. But as you look closer, you notice something unsettling beneath the disguise. A glint in its eye, a subtle movement that hints at something far more sinister. This is, of course, a cunning wolf cloaked in the skin of one of its intended victims, blending seamlessly into the flock. The mainstream historical fact here is that this fable is one of the most famous and widely referenced allegories for hidden danger betrayal and the warning that appearances can be profoundly deceptive. It's a fundamental narrative in Aesop's collection used to teach caution and discernment. The quirk, however, lies in the sheer audacity and effectiveness of the wolf's simple disguise, at least initially. You might think, wouldn't the sheep notice something's off? But no, their trusting nature coupled with the convincing exterior makes them vulnerable. Historians still argue whether fables like this were intended purely to teach children about vigilance, or if they also served as a subtle commentary on political hypocrisy and the dangers of trusting those who feign friendship to gain advantage. Regardless, the wolf's deception is chillingly effective. You can almost hear the wolf's muffled breath within the suffocating sheepskin, the slight awkwardness of its powerful legs trying to mimic a sheep's delicate steps. It moves among the trusting sheep, its predatory instincts barely contained, its hidden fangs aching for a bite. The sheep, unaware of the lurking danger, accept it as one of their own. They graze alongside it, their innocent ba-ba-ing, a stark contrast to the wolf's hidden ravenous intent. You might feel a prickle of unease knowing the truth behind the woolly disguise and wishing you could warn the unsuspecting flock. The wolf, biding its time, waits for the perfect moment. It observes the flock, calculates its moves, its false innocence, allowing it to get closer than any undisguised predator ever could. The shepherd, too, might initially be fooled, seeing just another sheep among his charges. It's a masterful act of camouflage demonstrating how outward conformity can conceal the most dangerous intentions. The sun beats down, the sheep graze, and the wolf waits, a predator, patiently lurking within the very heart of its prey. But as with all deceit, the truth is often revealed, sometimes through a slip, sometimes through external circumstances. In many versions, the shepherd eventually discovers the wolf, perhaps by noticing its predatory gait, or when he brings the flock into the fold at night and counts them, finding the wolf among them, its true nature given away by its inability to properly baa like a sheep, or perhaps by its eyes, which still hold the glint of a predator. You might hear the shepherd's sudden shout of alarm, the terrified scramble of the sheep as the disguise is finally broken, and the furious snarl of the exposed wolf. The fable ends with the wolf being dealt with, its deception revealed, and the flock saved from further harm. The moral is clear: be wary of those who appear harmless, or too good to be true, especially when they present themselves in a disguise of innocence. It teaches us to look beyond superficial appearances and to discern true character, for hidden malice can be far more dangerous than overt hostility. You, the silent observer, might feel a profound relief for the sheep and a renewed understanding that sometimes the greatest dangers wear the most unassuming masks. From the chilling deception of the wolf in sheep's clothing, you now turn to a fable that offers a satirical yet profound commentary on discontent with the status quo and the perils of seeking change unwisely. The Frogs Desiring a King. This tale hilariously illustrates how dissatisfaction can lead to unforeseen and often worse outcomes. Imagine a tranquil reed-lined pond in ancient Greece, its surface shimmering under the warm sun. You hear the rhythmic, contented croak, croak, croak of a community of vast frogs living a simple, free life. They bask on lily pads, leap after flies, and enjoy the pleasant chaos of their watery world. But soon a subtle discontent begins to ripple through their ranks. They are tired of their anarchic freedom. They crave order, a leader, a king to rule over them and give them dignity. You might feel a faint amusement at their human-like yearning for governance, even as amphibians. The mainstream historical fact here is that this fable is a classic political allegory often used to critique democratic instability or to warn against the dangers of inviting authoritarian rule when unsatisfied with existing freedoms. It's a timeless narrative about the grass always being greener. The quirk, however, lies in the frog's initial, almost childish naivety about what true governance entails. You might think, don't they know what they're asking for? But their desire for change blinds them to potential consequences. Historians still argue whether fables like this were intended to promote acceptance of existing power structures or to simply lampoon human political behavior through animal metaphors. Regardless, their discontent sets a comical chain of events in motion. You can almost hear the collective murmur of discontent among the frogs, their croaks, turning from contented to complaining. "We need a king," they declare to the heavens, their voices rising in a chorus of yearning. Zeus, the mighty king of the gods, hearing their incessant clamor, decides to humor them. He sends them a king, a large, heavy log, which splashes into their pond with a mighty plop. You hear the frightened splash, splash, splash of the frogs as they initially dive for cover, startled by their new monarch. For a short while, the frogs are awestruck. Their new king sits silently, majestically on the water. But soon their initial fear turns to contempt. "This is no king." They croak disappointment, turning into renewed discontent. "He just sits there. He does nothing. We wanted a mighty ruler, a figure of awe." You might feel a flicker of exasperation at their fickle nature, their quick turn from demanding a king to complaining about the one they received. They desired power, but only the ceremonial kind, not the practical or demanding. So they complain again to Zeus, begging for a new king, a truly powerful one. Zeus, growing weary of their incessant demands, obliges, but this time with a grim twist. He sends them a stork, a majestic bird with long legs and an even longer sharp beak. You hear the soft whoosh of the stork's wings as it descends, landing gracefully by the pond. The frogs are initially delighted, awestruck by its imposing presence. At last they croak, "A true king," but their joy quickly turns to horror. The stork, hungry and regal, begins to systematically pluck the frogs from the water one by one and swallows them whole with a decisive gulp. You hear the terrified splash, squeak, gulp. As the frogs realize their grave mistake, their desperate cries echoing through the pond. They beg Zeus for help, for freedom from this tyrannical ruler they themselves requested. But Zeus, through the moral of the fable, simply replies, "You asked for a king, and now you have one. Be content with your lot, or worse may befall you." It's a brutal yet undeniably effective lesson in the dangers of unthinking desire for change. This fable reminds us that unexamined desires can lead to unforeseen calamities. It teaches us to appreciate the freedoms we have, even if imperfect, and warns against the folly of seeking radical change without truly understanding the potential consequences. It's a timeless commentary on political stability and the perils of seeking a strong leader when simple peace suffices. The contented croaks, the frustrated complaints, the terrifying gulps. These are the indelible sounds of a fable that echoes through time, urging us to be careful what we wish for, lest we get precisely what we deserve. You, the silent observer, might feel a profound relief for your own freedom of choice, and perhaps a shiver of caution about the grass that always seems greener. From the tragic consequences of the frog's misguided desires, you now turn to a fable that offers a poignant yet comical lesson about the perils of counting your blessings before they're fully hatched. The Maid and the Pail of Milk. This tale beautifully illustrates how misplaced optimism and elaborate daydreaming can lead to a literal downfall. Imagine a bright, clear morning in ancient Greece, the sun warming your face, the air fresh with the scent of dew and wildflowers. You see a young milkmaid. Her dress simple and practical, walking along a winding path from the milking shed towards the market. On her head, balanced with elegant precision, rests a large brimming pail of fresh milk. Her steps are light, her heart even lighter, for her mind is not on the present moment, but on a fantastic future she is meticulously building entirely within her imagination. The mainstream historical fact here is that this fable is the quintessential cautionary tale about premature celebration and relying on unachieved gains, famously giving us the idiom, "Don't count your chickens before they hatch." It's a universal moral lesson about practical foresight versus overly ambitious daydreaming. The quirk, however, lies in the sheer vividness and escalating ambition of the milkmaid's daydream. You might think, surely she should be more focused on the milk, but her fantasy is so compelling she utterly loses herself in it. Historians still argue whether fables like this were primarily intended to teach prudence and a work ethic, or if they also subtly critiqued the unrealistic expectations of the working class hoping for sudden wealth. Regardless, her imaginative journey is captivating. You can almost hear the soft slosh slosh of the milk in the pail as she walks, a rhythmic sound that seems to punctuate her unfolding fantasy. "This milk," she muses, her eyes wide with unseeing delight, "I shall sell at the market for a good price." You see her smile, already picturing the coins in her hand. "With that money," she continues a little more confidently, "I shall buy a dozen eggs and they will hatch into beautiful chickens." You might feel a pang of shared hope for her simple, honest ambition. Her dream grows grander. "These chickens," she whispers, her steps quickening, "will lay even more eggs and I shall sell them to buy a fine pig." You see her mentally counting her future pigs, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. "And the pig," she thinks, her head held higher now, "will produce many piglets and I shall sell them all to buy a beautiful cow." The milk in the pail gently sloshes, a silent witness to her rapidly expanding farm. You might even chuckle softly at the effortless way her modest gains multiply into a veritable agricultural empire, all in her head. Her daydream reaches its peak of delightful fantasy. "And the cow," she declares to herself, her heart soaring, "will give me milk and butter and cheese, and I shall become so wealthy that I can afford to buy the finest dress in the village." She imagines herself in this magnificent new dress, attending a grand dance. A handsome young man approaches her asking for a dance. She, feeling confident and beautiful, would toss her head in refusal, a playful, haughty gesture. And with that imaginary toss of her head, with that final triumphant flourish of her daydream, core crash, you hear the shattering sound of ceramic on stone, the despairing splosh of milk spreading across the dusty path. The pail, her foundation of future wealth, lies broken. The beautiful dress, the chickens, the pigs, the cow, the handsome young man, all disappear in an instant, dissolved into the spilled milk. She is left with nothing but a broken pail, a damp path, and the bitter sudden realization that all her grand plans were built on a foundation of liquid imagination. This fable reminds us that it is wise to be practical and grounded in the present, rather than building elaborate castles in the air based on future unachieved gains. It teaches us to value what we have now and to work diligently towards actual success rather than relying on fantasy. It's a humorous yet poignant lesson in prudence and the dangers of allowing ambition to outstrip reality. The gentle slosh, the triumphant mental counting, the sudden devastating crash. These are the indelible marks of a tale that echoes through time, urging us to keep our feet on the ground, even when our heads are in the clouds. You, the silent observer, might feel a pang of shared disappointment for her lost dreams and perhaps a renewed appreciation for tangible rather than imaginary achievements. From the unfortunate splattering of the milkmaid's dreams, you now turn to a fable that offers a blunt yet profound commentary on ingratitude and the human tendency to criticize the very things that provide comfort. The Travelers and the Plane Tree. This isn't just a story about shade. It's a timeless illustration of how we often fail to appreciate the benefits we receive, especially from humble or unassuming sources. Imagine a scorching hot day in ancient Greece, the kind of day where the sun beats down relentlessly and the dust rises in shimmering waves from the parched earth. You see two travelers. Their clothes dusty, their faces beaded with sweat, trudging along a long exposed road. They are weary, exhausted by the relentless heat, desperate for any respite. The mainstream historical fact here is that ancient travelers in hot climates desperately sought shade-making trees, like the plane tree Platanus orientalis, known for its wide canopy, vital landmarks, and sources of relief. The quirk, however, lies in the travelers' immediate ingratitude and their surprising dismissal of the very thing providing them comfort. You might think they should be grateful for any shade, but no, their complaining minds quickly find fault. Historians still argue whether fables like this were intended to promote general gratitude or to subtly critique a specific human tendency towards ungratefulness, perhaps common among those who expected everything to be perfect. Regardless, their short-sightedness is clear. You can almost hear their weary sighs, their heavy footsteps, thud-thud-thudding on the hot ground. Then a beacon of hope appears, a magnificent Itarimana plane tree. Its branches spreading wide, offering a dense, inviting canopy of shade. With a collective sigh of relief, the travelers rush towards it, collapsing gratefully beneath its cool, dark embrace. You might feel a wave of shared relief imagining the immediate comfort of escaping the relentless sun, the instant drop in temperature beneath the thick leaves. They rest there for a while, enjoying the blessed coolness, letting the gentle breeze stir the leaves above them. The shade is deep, refreshing, a true haven from the oppressive heat. But after a few moments of blissful relief, one of the travelers, perhaps the more cynical one, begins to grumble. "What a useless tree this is," he mutters, stretching languidly. "It bears no fruit, no nuts, nothing useful at all. It's just shade." The other traveler nods in agreement, perhaps pulling a face, forgetting entirely the agony of the sun they had just escaped. You might feel a flicker of exasperation at their quick turn to criticism, their immediate dismissal of a gift. Suddenly, a voice echoes from the leaves above them, deep and resonant. It is the one plane tree, itself speaking with a gentle yet firm tone. "You ungrateful wretches!" The tree sighs, its leaves rustling with what sounds like disappointment. "You rest here, sheltered from the scorching sun, refreshed and cooled by my shade, and yet you call me useless. You criticize me for not providing more when I am giving you exactly what you most desperately needed." The travelers, startled by the speaking tree, look up, perhaps a little shamefaced. It's a moment of direct divine rebuke coming from the very source of their comfort. This fable reminds us that gratitude is essential for appreciating the blessings in our lives. No matter how simple or seemingly insignificant, it teaches us to look beyond immediate utility and to recognize the inherent value in comfort, protection, and relief, especially when it is freely given. It's a profound lesson in perspective, urging us to consider the source of our benefits before we thoughtlessly dismiss them. The scorching sun, the cool embrace of the shade, the ungrateful grumbles, the tree's gentle, firm rebuke. These are the indelible marks of a tale that echoes through time, urging us to cultivate a grateful heart and to remember that sometimes the greatest gifts are those that simply ease our burdens without asking for anything in return. You, the silent observer, might find yourself nodding in agreement, resolving to be more mindful of your own blessings, even the simplest ones like a patch of cool shade on a hot day. From the ungrateful travelers under the plane tree, you journey to a fable that offers a biting, rather cynical commentary on ingratitude and the often unrewarded nature of basic honesty. The Wolf and the Crane. This isn't just a tale about a surgical procedure. It's a stark illustration of how some beings will avoid showing gratitude even for life-saving assistance, and how good deeds are not always repaid in kind. Imagine a shadowy den in ancient Greece, perhaps smelling faintly of raw meat and damp earth. You see a fearsome wolf, its jaws agape, a look of agony on its face. It has a bone lodged firmly in its throat, a terrible predicament that threatens to choke it to death. It thrashes, it gags, utterly helpless in its distress despite its usual ferocity. Its life hangs in the balance. The mainstream historical fact here is that this fable is a classic example of a cautionary tale about expecting reward for a good deed performed for a dangerous or ungrateful individual, highlighting the idea that the absence of harm is sometimes the only reward. It's a core narrative in Aesop's collection, often used to teach pragmatism. The quirk, however, lies in the wolf's arrogant dismissal of any notion of gratitude, convinced that merely sparing the crane's life is payment enough. You might think he just saved your life. A thank you wouldn't kill you. But the wolf's nature is fundamentally selfish. Historians still argue whether fables like this were intended to teach a specific lesson about discerning who to help, or if they simply reflected a pessimistic view of human or animal nature and the prevalence of ingratitude. Regardless, the wolf's coldness is striking. You can almost hear the wolf's desperate gags, its muffled growls of pain, a terrifying sound that would usually send any creature fleeing. Then a long-legged, stately crane-orange. Attracted by the commotion, or perhaps by a sense of professional curiosity, or perhaps just hoping for a quick, easy meal if the wolf perished, approaches cautiously. The wolf, desperate, manages to communicate its plight, promising a great reward if the crane can extract the bone. You might feel a surge of nervous anticipation, wondering if the crane will be brave enough to approach such a dangerous patient. The crane, demonstrating remarkable courage and skill, agrees. You watch, holding your breath, as the crane carefully inserts its long, slender beak deep into the wolf's throat, navigating past its fearsome teeth, gently dislodging the bone. It's a delicate, dangerous operation requiring absolute precision and trust on the crane's part. You can almost hear the soft click as the bone is freed, and the wolf lets out a huge, relieving gasp of air. The crane then swiftly withdraws its beak, pulling the offending bone triumphantly from the wolf's throat. You might feel a sigh of relief for both creatures, a sense of satisfaction that a life has been saved. The crane, having performed this life-saving surgery, then politely asks for its promised reward. The wolf, now free of pain and danger, simply looks at the crane with a sneer. Reward! It snarls, its voice now fully recovered, menacing once more. You want a reward? Is it not reward enough that I, a wolf, allowed you to remove your head from my jaws? Be gone before I change my mind? The crane, wise enough to recognize the wolf's true nature, simply bows its head, perhaps with a flicker of resignation, and silently flies away, understanding that for some, the absence of harm is the only thanks you'll ever get. This fable reminds us that some individuals are inherently ungrateful and self-serving, and that expecting reciprocity from them can lead to bitter disappointment. It teaches us about the harsh realities of the world, where good deeds are not always rewarded, and sometimes simply escaping harm is the greatest payment. It's a cynical yet pragmatic lesson in human nature, urging us to be discerning about where we invest our kindness. The painful gags, the delicate click, the harsh snarl, these are the indelible marks of a tale that echoes through time, cautioning us about the ungratefulness of the powerful and the wisdom of knowing when to simply walk away. You, the silent observer, might feel a pang of frustration for the crane and a renewed understanding that not every act of kindness earns a gold medal. From the ungrateful snarl of the wolf, you now turn to a fable that offers a profound and rather darkly humorous contemplation of existence and the universal fear of ultimate cessation. The Old Man and Death. This isn't just a story about a tired soul. It's a timeless illustration of how, even when life feels unbearable, the prospect of its end can be even more terrifying. Imagine a dusty, sun-baked road in ancient Greece winding its way through desolate fields. You see a very old man, his back bent with age, his limbs frail, his face deeply furrowed with the struggles of a long, hard life. He carries a heavy bundle of sticks on his shoulders, the weight of them seemingly mirroring the burdens of his existence. Each step is an effort, each breath a weary sigh. He is utterly exhausted, his spirit almost broken by the relentless toil. The mainstream historical fact here is that Aesop's fables often explored universal human experiences and emotions, including the fear of death and the burdens of life, reflecting philosophical concerns common in ancient Greek thought. It's a poignant and deeply resonant narrative about the human condition. The quirk, however, lies in the old man's desperate plea for death, only to recoil in terror when his wish is granted. You might think he asked for it. Why is he surprised? But the reality of his wish is far more unsettling than the theoretical desire. Historians still argue whether fables like this were intended to encourage resilience in the face of hardship, or to simply highlight the inherent human paradox of clinging to life even when suffering. Regardless, the old man's terror is palpable. You can almost hear the old man's raspy coughs, the ragged sound of his breathing, and the rhythmic thud, thud, thud of his heavy bundle of sticks against his stooped back. He trudges along his misery, palpable, until he can bear it no longer. With a groan, he throws his bundle down the sticks, scattering across the dusty road, and collapses to the ground, utterly spent. "Oh, death, death!" he cries out, his voice hoarse with despair. "Come take me, I cannot bear this life any longer. End my suffering." It's a genuine plea born from the depths of profound weariness and hopelessness. As his desperate words hang in the still air, a chilling silence descends. Then out of the shimmering heat haze, a gaunt, shadowy figure appears. You see, Chiriste, itself personified, cloaked in dark robes, its presence radiating an undeniable chill, even on this hot day. Death stands before the old man, silent and imposing, its skeletal hand outstretched. "You called me," a voice echoes dry as rustling leaves. "Here I am. What is it you wish?" The old man, who moments before had yearned for release, now looks up, his eyes widening in pure, unadulterated terror. The abstract concept of death has become a terrifying reality standing before him. The weariness, the burdens, the suffering, all seem trivial compared to the absolute finality now presenting itself. His face, moments ago resigned to despair, is now contorted with a primal fear of the unknown. "Oh, Master Death," he stammers, scrambling to retrieve his scattered sticks, his voice trembling. I, I merely called for you to help me pick up my bundle of sticks. Yes, that's it. They were too heavy for me to lift alone." He says it with a desperate, almost comical urgency, clinging to the very burdens he had moments ago wished to cast off. Death, perhaps, with a silent, knowing shrug or a slight tilt of its skull-like head, simply watches as the old man, suddenly imbued with a strange, frantic energy, hastily gathers his sticks, lifts the heavy bundle back onto his shoulders, and shuffles away down the road with surprising speed, desperate to escape the very end he had so recently invited. He is still burdened, still weary, but undeniably alive, and for now that is enough. This fable reminds us that life, even in its most burdensome forms, is often preferable to the absolute unknown of death. It teaches us about the inherent human instinct to cling to existence and the profound, often irrational fear of the void. It's a darkly humorous, yet deeply insightful lesson in perspective, urging us to reconsider our complaints and appreciate the very breath in our lungs. The heavy thud of the sticks, the desperate cry, the chilling presence of death, and the frantic scramble. These are the indelible marks of a tale that echoes through time, whispering about our complicated relationship with mortality. You, the silent observer, might feel a profound sense of relief for the old man, and perhaps a renewed appreciation for the simple fact of being alive, even with your own daily burdens. From the profound contemplation of life and death, you now turn to a fable that offers a witty yet practical warning about premature celebration and the dangers of misinterpreting signs. The Spendthrift and the Swallow. This isn't just a story about a bird. It's a timeless illustration of how rash decisions based on insufficient evidence can lead to ruin. Imagine a bustling city in ancient Greece, perhaps Athens, where the sun is finally beginning to warm the streets after a long, cold winter. You see a waspendthrift, a young man of inherited wealth known for his extravagant habits and his disdain for prudent management. He is dressed in fine but perhaps slightly worn clothes, his pockets perpetually lighter than they should be. He longs for the warmth of summer, for the ease of outdoor living, for anything that will justify his lavish lifestyle. The mainstream historical fact here is that swallows are migratory birds whose arrival was a well-known sign of spring and warmer weather in ancient Greece, making them a common symbol of seasonal change. The quirk, however, lies in the spendthrift's absurdly hasty decision-making based on the sighting of a single bird. You might think, one swallow doesn't make a summer, does it? But for someone desperate to justify their recklessness, it's all the proof they need. Historians still argue whether fables like this were intended to teach specific economic lessons about financial prudence, or if they primarily served as broader moral warnings against impulsiveness and short-sightedness. Regardless, the spendthrift's folly is clear. You can almost hear the chatter of the city, the distant cries of street vendors, and the subtle shift in the air as winter begins to loosen its grip. The spendthrift shivers slightly, perhaps, thinking about his dwindling funds and the need to sell off more assets. Then one bright morning, his eyes light up. High above, darting gracefully through the clear sky, he spots a single swallow, its dark wings catching the sunlight. To anyone else, it might be a pleasant sign of spring's approach. To the spendthrift, it's a triumphant declaration of summer's arrival, and with it an excuse for even greater extravagance. Aha! He exclaims, a wide, foolish grin spreading across his face. The swallow is here, summer has arrived. No more need for these heavy clothes. And in a truly impulsive act, he immediately sells his fine, warm cloak, perhaps the last valuable item he possesses, or one of the few pieces of clothing that truly protects him from the elements. You might feel a pang of apprehension, knowing the unpredictable nature of spring weather, and wishing you could warn him against such rashness. He envisions himself enjoying the outdoor life free from the encumbrance of heavy garments, convinced that warm days are here to stay. But spring, as anyone who lives through it knows, can be fickle. Just a few days later, a sudden cold snap descends. You feel the biting chill in the air, the unexpected return of winter's icy breath. A cold wind whips through the streets, and a light rain or even sleet begins to fall. The spendthrift, now without his cloak, shivers uncontrollably, his teeth chattering, regretting his hasty decision with every goosebump that rises on his skin. He looks up at the bleak sky, his face miserable, and then forlornly he spots the same swallow also shivering, perhaps huddled miserably under an awning, equally caught off guard by the unexpected cold. "Oh, swallow, wretched bird!" he cries, shaking a fist at the poor creature. "You have ruined me! You lied! You brought winter back!" It's a moment of pathetic blame, typical of someone who refuses to acknowledge their own poor judgment. The swallow, of course, gives no reply, simply huddling against the cold, its presence a stark reminder of the spendthrift's foolishness. This fable reminds us that true wisdom lies in patience and careful observation, not in impulsive action based on isolated events. It teaches us about the dangers of premature celebration and the folly of making significant decisions without considering all the evidence. It's a witty yet pointed lesson in prudence and the unpredictable nature of life. The soft chirp of the swallow, the triumphant declaration, the sudden bitter chill. These are the indelible marks of a tale that echoes through time, urging us to look beyond single signs and to always save something for a rainy day. You, the silent observer, might feel a shiver of shared cold and perhaps a renewed appreciation for wearing layers just in case. From the shivering folly of the spendthrift and his swallow, you now turn to a fable that offers a profound lesson about different responses to adversity and the contrasting strengths found in diverse natures. The Two Pots. This isn't just a story about kitchenware. It's a timeless illustration of how vulnerability and hardiness shape one's ability to navigate the harsh currents of life. Imagine a swift-flowing river in ancient Greece, its currents strong and relentless, carrying debris along its course. You see two pots, both adrift in the water, caught in the same powerful flow. One is a brass pot, gleaming and sturdy, its metallic surface reflecting the sunlight. The other is a clay pot, humble and fragile, its earthy surface easily chipped. They are side by side, forced into a perilous journey downriver together, completely at the mercy of the current. The mainstream historical fact here is that pottery and metalwork were essential crafts in ancient Greece, making the materials of these pots instantly recognizable and relatable to the audience. This fable is a classic allegory for the idea that those who are strong and rigid might be more susceptible to breaking than those who are humble and flexible when faced with life's trials. The quirk, however, lies in the brass pot's initial confidence in its own strength, completely underestimating the dangers of its rigidity. You might think, wouldn't the brass pot be safer? But its very nature proves to be its undoing. Historians still argue whether fables like this were intended to teach specific lessons about social class, the sturdy rich versus the fragile poor, or if they were broader philosophical commentaries on different approaches to life's challenges. Regardless, their journey is compelling. You can almost hear the soft gurgle of the river as it rushes downstream, the faint clink of the brass pot as it occasionally brushes against a pebble, and the quiet, almost resigned swish of the clay pot through the water. The brass pot, confident in its durable material, begins to boast. "Fear not, my dear clay pot," it might exclaim, its metallic voice ringing out. "Stay close to me, and I will protect you from the dangers of the river. My strength will shield you from any bumps and rocks." The clay pot, humble and wise to its own fragility, simply replies, "Thank you, friend, but I think it's safer if I keep my distance. For if we should collide, it is I who will surely break, despite your strength." You might feel a pang of apprehension for the clay pot, sensing its vulnerability. The current grows swifter, the riverbed rougher. Boulders and sharp rocks begin to appear, looming menacingly in the path of the two pots. The brass pot, proud of its resilience, tries to navigate through the obstacles, bouncing off them with loud clangs and bangs. Each collision tests its strength, but it remains unbroken. However, each impact also sends ripples of force through the water, sometimes pushing it dangerously close to the clay pot. You can almost feel the vibrations of the impacts, the harshness of the collisions. The clay pot, remembering its own fragile nature, wisely chooses a different strategy. Instead of seeking protection or trying to deflect the impacts, it simply allows itself to be carried by the gentlest currents, yielding to the flow, avoiding direct collisions with the obstacles, and crucially avoiding any contact with its brass companion. It bobs and weaves, sometimes spinning gently, sometimes scraping lightly against a smooth pebble, but it always avoids a hard impact. You might even hear the soft scrape of earth against stone, a gentle yielding sound. As the river journey continues, the brass pot, despite its strength, suffers repeated violent collisions. Its once gleaming surface becomes dented and scarred, its rigid structure constantly challenged. The clay pot, by contrast, endures its journey with greater ease precisely because of its perceived weakness. It avoids the crushing impacts that the brass pot invites. Finally, after a long and treacherous journey, the clay pot, though perhaps a little muddied, washes ashore largely intact, while the brass pot, despite its initial boasts of strength, lies broken and battered, its rigidity having made it susceptible to shattering impacts. This fable reminds us that true strength can sometimes lie in flexibility and humility, and that arrogance, even when backed by apparent robustness, can lead to downfall. It teaches us that understanding and respecting your own limitations and the limitations of others is crucial for survival and peaceful coexistence. It's a profound lesson in adaptability and self-awareness. The gentle swish, the confident clang, the final shattering silence. These are the indelible marks of a tale that echoes through time, urging us to consider whether our strength lies in rigidity or in the wisdom of yielding to life's inevitable currents. You, the silent observer, might feel a newfound appreciation for the quiet resilience of the unassuming, and perhaps a subtle warning against the dangers of being too unbending. From the contrasting resilience of the two pots, you now turn to a fable that offers a poignant yet rather awkward commentary on mistaken identity and the comical futility of trying to be what you're not. The Ass and the Lapdog. This isn't just a story about an animal's misguided ambition. It's a timeless illustration of how mimicking others, especially when unsuited to your nature, can lead to painful rejection. Imagine a grand house in ancient Greece, perhaps a nobleman's villa, where elegance and refinement are highly valued. You see a small, pampered, Urbakshas lapdog, its fur soft and perfectly groomed, its tail wagging incessantly. It sits on its mistress's lap, lavished with affection, receiving gentle strokes and sweet morsels. It barks playfully, licks faces, and performs tiny, charming tricks, utterly adored by the household. This is a creature born for affection, perfectly suited to its role. The mainstream historical fact here is that dogs were kept as pets in ancient Greece, with different breeds serving different purposes, from hunting to companionship, reflecting varied societal roles. This fable is a classic and widely recognized allegory for the idea that one should not try to imitate others when it goes against one's own nature or abilities, highlighting the importance of self-awareness. The quirk, however, lies in the ass's utterly sincere yet tragically misguided belief that it too can win affection by mimicking the lapdog's behavior. You might think, doesn't he see how big and clumsy he is? But his envy blinds him to reality. Historians still argue whether fables like this were intended to teach children about accepting their place in society, or if they subtly critiqued social climbing and attempts to gain favor through false pretenses. Regardless, the ass's efforts are painfully comical. You can almost hear the soft yap 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 of the lapdog, its happy little barks of delight as it receives attention. Then you see a large, sturdy ass, a beast of burden from the stable watching the lapdog with growing envy. Its days are filled with arduous work carrying heavy loads, its rough bray, never eliciting cuddles. It longs for the gentle strokes, the sweet treats, the affectionate words that the lapdog so effortlessly receives. It mistakenly believes that the actions of the lapdog are what bring affection rather than its inherent nature and suitability for its role. Driven by this misguided desire for love, the ass decides to imitate the lapdog. You watch with a mixture of amusement and dread as the large, clumsy ass lumbers into the drawing room where the mistress is seated. With a desperate attempt at playfulness, it tries to leap onto her lap. You hear the indignant yelp of the mistress, the terrified clatter of falling furniture, and the surprised thump as the ass, far too heavy and awkward, lands with a crash, narrowly missing the mistress's delicate porcelain tea set. It tries to lick her face, its large, rough tongue, a far cry from the lapdog's gentle licks. It tries to bark, producing a loud, jarring hee-haw that shatters the peaceful atmosphere. The servants, hearing the commotion, rush in. You hear their shouts of alarm, the frantic shooing sounds. The ass, instead of receiving cuddles, is met with blows and angry words driven back to the stable, with curses and a stern warning. It is left bruised and bewildered, its well-intentioned but fundamentally misguided attempts at affection met with harsh rejection. The lapdog, meanwhile perhaps still trembling, is once again cradled and comforted by its mistress, the stark contrast highlighting the ass's painful folly. This fable reminds us that authenticity and self-awareness are crucial. It teaches us that trying to imitate others, especially when it goes against our true nature or abilities, will only lead to frustration, rejection, and often ridicule. It's a poignant lesson in accepting oneself, understanding one's own strengths and limitations, and finding genuine contentment in one's unique role. The soft yap, the clumsy crash, the angry shouts, and the mournful hee-haw. These are the indelible marks of a tale that echoes through time, urging us to be true to ourselves, for trying to be a lapdog when you're an ass only ends in tears. You, the silent observer, might feel a pang of sympathy for the well-meaning but misguided ass, and perhaps a renewed appreciation for simply being yourself. From the comical clumsiness of the ass, you now turn to a brief yet profoundly insightful fable that offers a stark warning about arrogance, self-importance, and the fleeting nature of unearned glory. The lamp. This isn't just a story about a light source. It's a timeless illustration of how outward brilliance can blind one to humility and the true source of one's value. Imagine a grand banquet hall in ancient Greece, perhaps filled with revelers, their faces illuminated by the warm flickering glow of many lights. You see a magnificent lamp placed prominently on a pedestal, its flame burning brightly, casting a brilliant light across the room. It feels important, self-assured, believing its own radiance to be entirely its own creation, a testament to its inherent superiority. The mainstream historical fact here is that lamps fueled by oil were essential for lighting in ancient Greek homes and public spaces, making them a common and relatable object for fables. This fable is a classic allegory for the dangers of hubris and self-importance, reminding us that all talent and success often come from external sources, whether that be divine favor, natural gifts, or the support of others. The quirk, however, lies in the lamp's complete obliviousness to the source of its own light. You might think, doesn't it realize it needs oil? But its arrogance makes it utterly self-absorbed. Historians still argue whether fables like this were intended to promote humility in individuals or to subtly critique the arrogance of powerful rulers who forgot their dependence on their subjects. Regardless, the lamp's pride sets the stage for a humbling lesson. You can almost hear the soft hiss of the lamp's wick, the gentle crackle of its flame, and the low murmur of admiration from those who bask in its brilliant glow. The lamp puffing itself up, if lamps could puff, might even imagine itself superior to the very stars in the sky, brighter than any fire. It believes itself to be the fount of all illumination, the center of attention, without acknowledging the humble unseen oil that fuels its very existence. It sees the praise, the admiration, and attributes it all to its own inherent magnificent self. You might feel a flicker of exasperation at its blatant self-absorption, recognizing the all-too-human tendency to take credit for what is merely borrowed or given. The hours pass. The banquet hall slowly empties, the sounds of revelry diminish, and the night deepens. The lamp continues to shine, but its flame begins to flicker, growing weaker, its light dimming. It struggles perhaps to maintain its former brilliance, perplexed by its diminishing power. It doesn't understand that its source of strength is being consumed slowly, inevitably. You can almost see the flame shrinking its once proud glow, now a feeble, pathetic sputter. The shadows in the room lengthen, growing deeper, consuming the space the lamp once illuminated so confidently. Finally, with a last desperate flicker, the lamp's flame dies out, plunging the room into complete darkness. It is left as just an empty vessel, its glory extinguished, its self-importance revealed as utterly hollow. A passing servant, perhaps, would simply come in the morning, refill it with oil, and light it anew, completely unaware of its philosophical journey into hubris and humility. This fable reminds us that when all forms of brilliance, success, or power are often dependent on unseen external factors. It teaches us the critical importance of humility, gratitude, and acknowledging the sources of our strength. It's a profound lesson in perspective, urging us not to become so consumed by our own perceived glow that we forget the humble oil that sustains us. The bright glow, the boastful thoughts, the flickering demise, the sudden darkness. These are the indelible marks of a tale that echoes through time, whispering about the fleeting nature of arrogance and the enduring value of humility. You, the silent observer, might feel a sudden appreciation for the unseen foundations of your own life, and perhaps a gentle reminder to occasionally thank your own oil. From the humbling darkness of the extinguished lamp, you now turn to a fable that explores the complex dynamics of trust, fear, and the inherent difficulties in understanding vastly different beings. The Man and the Satyr. This isn't just a story about a strange encounter. It's a timeless illustration of how differing perspectives and inherent natures can lead to suspicion and misunderstanding. Imagine a chilly gray day in an ancient Greek forest, perhaps with a touch of dampness in the air, the kind that makes you yearn for warmth. You see a Manu, a simple woodcutter trudging through the trees, his axe heavy on his shoulder. He's cold, his breath misting in the air, and he longs for the comfort of a fire. Suddenly emerging from the gnarled roots of a great tree appears a here, a mythical creature of the woods, half human and half goat, with pointed ears and a mischievous glint in his eyes. He is curious, wild, and utterly unfamiliar with human customs. The mainstream historical fact here is that satyrs were common figures in ancient Greek mythology and folklore, representing wildness, revelry, and sometimes mischief, making their interaction with humans a familiar trope. This fable is a classic allegory for the idea that what is natural or acceptable for one being might be confusing or even threatening to another, highlighting the challenges of interspecies or intercultural understanding. The quirk, however, lies in the satyr's profound inability to grasp the nuanced, contradictory nature of human actions. You might think, why can't he just understand? But his simplistic, nature-bound logic fails him. Historians still argue whether fables like this were intended to teach caution in dealing with the other, or to subtly highlight the perceived irrationality or duplicity of human nature from an outsider's perspective. Regardless, the satyr's confusion is key. You can almost hear the soft crunch of the man's boots on fallen leaves, his deep shuddering breaths in the cold air. The satyr approaches, intrigued by this human, especially when the man raises his hand to his mouth and blows on his fingers. "What are you doing, man?" the satyr asks, his voice reedy and curious. The man, surprised but friendly, replies, I am blowing on my hands to warm them, for it is cold. You might feel a pleasant warmth spread through your own hands, remembering the simple comfort of such an act. The satyr, fascinated, continues to follow the man. They eventually arrive at the man's humble dwelling, where he quickly kindles a fire. The flames leap up, casting a warm, inviting glow. The man, feeling the cold, deeply blows on his soup to cool it before eating. The satyr, watching intently, sees this familiar action. "What are you doing now, man?" the satyr asks, his brow furrowed in confusion. The man, taking a spoonful, replies, "I am blowing on my soup to cool it, for it is too hot to eat." A profound mistrust then enters the satyr's eyes. You see his pointed ears flatten slightly, his wild gaze hardening. He backs away slowly, a look of growing suspicion on his face. He cannot reconcile the two actions. "I will have nothing to do with a creature," he declares, his voice suddenly sharp and wary, "who blows both hot and cold with the same breath." And with that, the satyr turns and vanishes back into the shadowy depths of the forest, leaving the man bewildered by his sudden departure. The man, simple in his ways, cannot understand the satyr's leap to judgment. This fable reminds us that actions can be misinterpreted when viewed through a different lens, and that inherent differences in nature or understanding can lead to profound mistrust. It teaches us about the challenges of communication and empathy, especially when bridging cultural or experiential divides. It's a profound lesson in perspective, urging us to consider how our seemingly innocent actions might appear to those who perceive the world very differently. The cold whoosh of breath, the warm crackling of fire, the satyr's sudden suspicion. These are the indelible marks of a tale that echoes through time, whispering about the complexities of understanding. You, the silent observer, might feel a pang of sympathy for both figures, recognizing the universal difficulty of truly seeing the world through another's eyes. From the intriguing misunderstanding between the man and the satyr, you now turn to a fable that offers a blunt yet important lesson about the dangers of guilt by association and the consequences of being found in bad company. The Farmer and the Stork. This isn't just a story about birds. It's a timeless illustration of how even innocent intentions can be punished when one is linked to notorious wrongdoers. Imagine a golden sun-drenched field in ancient Greece, where a diligent farmer has meticulously sown his seeds. The wheat shoots are beginning to emerge, promising a bountiful harvest. However, among the tender young plants, you see a mischievous flock of cranes, known for their habit of pecking at freshly sown seeds, causing damage to crops. The farmer, exasperated by their persistent pilfering, decides to take action. The mainstream historical fact here is that farmers in ancient Greece, like everywhere, struggled with pest control, making birds like cranes a genuine threat to their livelihoods. This fable is a classic allegory for the idea that one can be condemned by the company they keep, even if innocent of direct wrongdoing, highlighting the importance of discernment in one's associations. The quirk, however, lies in the stork's earnest, almost pitiful plea of innocence, which ultimately fails to sway the farmer. You might think surely he can tell the difference, but the farmer's frustration with the real culprits overshadows any subtle distinctions. Historians still argue whether fables like this were intended to promote caution in choosing associates or to reflect a cynical view of justice, where circumstance can condemn the innocent. Regardless, the stork's plight is clear. You can almost hear the gentle rustle of the young wheat, the incessant peck, peck, peck of the cranes as they forage, and the farmer's grumbling curses as he surveys the damage. Deciding he's had enough, the farmer sets a large, intricate net across his field, hoping to catch the feathered thieves. You might feel a flicker of anticipation, wondering if his trap will be successful. The next morning, as the sun rises, the farmer returns to his field. His trap has worked. You hear the frantic flapping of wings, the distressed squawk, squawk, squawk of the captured cranes as they struggle in the netting. But as the farmer approaches to collect his catch, he notices something unexpected. Caught amidst the cranes equally entangled in the net is a stately sheer stork. This stork, unlike the cranes, is known for its noble reputation, a bird that traditionally symbolized good fortune and piety, and crucially one that eats harmful insects, not precious crops. The stork, its long legs tangled, its proud head bowed, pleads with the farmer. "Oh, kind sir," it cries, its voice clear and earnest. "Please release me, I am no crane. I am a stork, a bird of good omen, and I do not eat your seeds. I eat lizards and snakes, and help keep your fields free of pests. Look at my noble feathers, my upright stance, so different from these common cranes." You might feel a pang of sympathy for the stork, recognizing its genuine innocence and its desperate plea for justice. It tries to explain, to differentiate itself, to appeal to reason, but the farmer, weary from his losses and frustrated by the thieving cranes, is unmoved. His gaze sweeps over the struggling birds, seeing only their shared predicament within the net. "Perhaps you speak the truth, noble stork," the farmer replies, his voice firm and unwavering. "But I found you among these thieves. You were caught in their company, and therefore you must suffer their fate." And with that, he gathers the net, pulling the innocent stork along with the guilty cranes, destined for the same grim end. This fable reminds us that our associations can profoundly impact our reputation and fate. Even if our intentions are pure, it teaches us to be discerning about the company we keep, for in times of judgment, distinctions can be blurred, and innocence can be overshadowed by circumstance. It's a harsh yet pragmatic lesson in social consequences. The frantic flapping, the earnest plea, the farmer's unyielding judgment, and the shared tragic fate. These are the indelible marks of a tale that echoes through time, urging us to consider not just our own actions, but the company we keep, lest we too become a stork among cranes. You, the silent observer, might feel a profound sense of injustice and perhaps a renewed caution about who you choose to stand beside. From the unfortunate entanglement of the stork, you now turn to a fable that offers a darkly humorous, yet surprisingly relatable commentary on disproportionate anger and the futility of petty revenge. The Bald Man and the Fly. This isn't just a story about an insect. It's a timeless illustration of how trivial annoyances can provoke extreme reactions, often to one's own detriment. Imagine a warm, languid afternoon in ancient Greece. You see a rather distinguished bald man, perhaps taking a peaceful nap in his garden or enjoying a quiet moment of contemplation. The air is still, save for the gentle hum of summer insects. His scalp, smooth and gleaming in the sun, presents an inviting, if unwitting, landing strip. The mainstream historical fact here is that flies were a common nuisance in ancient Greece, as in most pre-modern societies, making them a relatable antagonist in fables. This fable is a classic and widely recognized allegory for the dangers of overreacting to minor provocations and the self-defeating nature of uncontrolled anger. It highlights the human tendency to escalate trivial irritations. The quirk, however, lies in the bald man's absurdly violent reaction to such a tiny, insignificant creature, and the fly's almost philosophical retort. You might think it's just a fly, why such rage? But the irritation is profound. Historians still argue whether fables like this were intended to teach self-control and patience, or if they also served as a comedic commentary on human vanity and the loss of dignity in moments of uncontrolled anger. Regardless, the man's frustration is palpable. You can almost hear the soft, irritating buzz, buzz, buzz of a persistent fly as it circles the bald man's head. It lands perhaps on his shiny scalp, tickling him just enough to disturb his peaceful nap. The bald man, annoyed, swats at it. The fly, however, is nimble, easily evading his hand, only to return seconds later, landing in a new spot, perhaps on his nose. This isn't a malicious attack. It's just the natural irritating behavior of an insect. But for the bald man whose peace has been disturbed, it becomes a personal affront. You might feel a flicker of shared annoyance remembering your own battles with persistent insects. The fly continues its torment, buzzing around his ears, landing on his face, his bald head, his hands. The man's annoyance quickly escalates into irrational fury. He swats harder, more violently, grunting with frustration. He leaps up, abandoning his peaceful repose, determined to eradicate the tiny tormentor. He chases the fly around the room or garden, his movements becoming increasingly frantic and undignified. He tries to crush it, to smash it, his efforts becoming more destructive than the fly's original annoyance. You might even hear his exasperated shouts, the frantic smack, watch of his hands against various surfaces. In his blind rage trying to swat the tiny fly, the bald man accidentally slaps himself, perhaps quite hard, leaving a stinging red mark on his own cheek. The fly, meanwhile unharmed, and perhaps even a little amused, buzzes triumphantly away, escaping his fury. The bald man is left panting, red-faced in pain, and utterly defeated by a creature he could not even touch, having inflicted more harm on himself than the fly ever could. The fable concludes with the fly from a safe distance mockingly buzzing, "You wanted to kill me, a tiny fly, and in your anger you have only managed to hurt yourself. What a fool you are." It's a moment of profound self-inflicted humiliation. This fable reminds us that disproportionate anger often harms ourselves more than the object of our rage. It teaches us about the futility of petty revenge, the importance of self-control, and the wisdom of letting go of trivial annoyances. It's a darkly comedic yet deeply insightful lesson in emotional regulation. The irritating buzz, the furious smack, the pained grunt, and the mocking retreat. These are the indelible marks of a tale that echoes through time, urging us to choose our battles wisely and to remember that sometimes the best revenge is simply not caring enough to get mad. You, the silent observer, might feel a sympathetic sting on your cheek and perhaps a renewed commitment to a calmer, less reactive existence. From the stinging slap of the bald man's folly, you now turn to a fable that offers a poignant yet rather cynical commentary on accountability and the uncomfortable truth that even indirect participation in harm carries consequences. The Trumpeter Taken Prisoner. This isn't just a story about a musician. It's a timeless illustration of how one cannot escape responsibility for the part they play in destructive acts, even if they claim merely to be an instrument. Imagine a chaotic battlefield in ancient Greece, the air thick with dust, the clash of bronze and the shouts of men. Amidst the din, you see a trumpeter, not directly engaged in combat, but standing proudly with his shining bronze trumpet, blowing a loud, piercing call. His role is to incite the soldiers to direct the charge to signal retreat, essentially to be the voice of battle guiding the chaotic dance of war. The mainstream historical fact here is that trumpeters were crucial non-combatant roles in ancient armies, vital for communication and morale, but still integral to the machinery of war. This fable is a classic allegory for the idea that complicity in harmful acts, even through an indirect role, still makes one morally accountable, highlighting the concept of shared responsibility. The quirk, however, lies in the trumpeter's naive belief that his musical role somehow exempts him from the consequences of the battle. You might think, doesn't he realize his music leads to death? But he sees himself as a mere performer. Historians still argue whether fables like this were intended to promote pacifism or to simply critique the idea of moral detachment in times of conflict, suggesting that all who contribute to war are culpable. Regardless, the trumpeter's plea is quickly dismissed. You can almost hear the trumpeter's triumphant blare blar as he sounds a charge, sending soldiers rushing forward into the fray. He feels powerful, his music a catalyst for action, a driving force in the chaos. He sees himself as an artist, perhaps a vital part of the military performance, but not a fighter. He carries no sword, no shield, only his instrument, believing this makes him innocent of the bloodshed. You might feel a flicker of unease, recognizing the subtle distinction he tries to draw and sensing its inherent flaw. But fate, as often happens in fables, intervenes swiftly. During a skirmish, the trumpeter, despite his non-combatant status, is suddenly taken prisoner by the opposing side. He is dragged before the enemy general, his shining trumpet still clutched in his hand, looking bewildered and indignant. He expects to be released, perhaps with a polite nod, for he has shed no blood himself. "Please, good sir," he pleads, his voice trembling now, far from its usual confident blare. "I beg you spare me. I am not a fighter. I carry no weapon, only this trumpet I do not kill. I merely blow my instrument to give signals to my own men." He tries to justify his existence, to explain his perceived innocence, appealing to their sense of fair play. He believes his hands are clean because they never wielded a sword. The enemy general, however, looks at him with a cold, hard gaze. "Foolish man," he retorts, his voice sharp and unyielding. You may not carry a sword, but your trumpet, with its loud signals, has caused more death and destruction than any single warrior. You incite the men to battle you, direct their charges, you rally them to shed blood. Your instrument is as deadly as any weapon, for it guides the hand of violence. And with that, the general gives a terse command, and the trumpeter is led away to face the same grim fate as the soldiers he directed. His plea for exemption falls on deaf ears. His claim of innocence is utterly rejected. This fable reminds us that true responsibility extends beyond direct action to encompass complicity and influence. It teaches us that one cannot claim innocence when one's actions, even seemingly indirect or artistic, contribute to harm or destruction. It's a harsh yet profoundly ethical lesson in accountability, urging us to consider the full impact of our contributions, whatever our role. The triumphant blare, the desperate plea, the chilling, unyielding judgment. These are the indelible marks of a tale that echoes through time, whispering about the interconnectedness of all actions and the uncomfortable truth that even the conductor of the orchestra of war is not absolved from its consequences. You, the silent observer, might feel a deep respect for this uncompromising moral and perhaps a renewed awareness of your own influence in the world, however subtle. From the chilling accountability of the trumpeter, you now gently drift from the sun-drenched hills and bustling marketplaces of ancient Greece as our journey through the whimsical world of fables reaches its tranquil conclusion. This is the Legacy of Fables, Timeless Sleep. A moment to reflect on the enduring impact of these simple stories on literature, thought, and the very fabric of human understanding before we ourselves settle into a calming wind-down. Imagine the quiet of the Grecian night, the stars now twinkling brightly above the sounds of the day, hushed to a whisper. You see the faint outlines of olive trees, the gentle ripple of a quiet pond, the distant silhouette of a shepherd's hut. The figures of the fox, the ant, the lion, the donkey, and all the myriad creatures of Aesop's world are fading, returning to the realm of pure thought. The mainstream historical fact here is that Aesop's fables, whether from a single author or a collection of oral traditions, have profoundly influenced Western literature, philosophy, and moral education for over 2 millennia, translated into countless languages and adapted into myriad forms. They are a cornerstone of our collective wisdom. The quirk, however, lies in how these deceptively simple stories, often about talking animals, have managed to convey such complex and universal truths about human nature, morality, and societal interactions, often more effectively than lengthy philosophical treatises. You might think, how can a story about a fox and some grapes be so profound? Yet it is. Historians still argue whether the enduring power of fables lies in their accessible, memorable narratives, their universal themes that transcend specific cultures, or their ability to simplify complex moral dilemmas into digestible lessons. Regardless, their reach is undeniable. You can almost hear the faint echoes of the stories themselves, the persistent plink of the crow's pebbles, the triumphant squeak of the mouse, the arrogant hee-haw of the donkey, the soothing croak of the frogs before their fateful wish. These aren't just sounds. They are mental impressions, lessons deeply embedded in your mind, woven into the fabric of your understanding. The fables have taught you about diligence, kindness, the perils of deceit, the wisdom of humility, the dangers of greed, and the importance of self-awareness. They've shown you how persuasion can triumph over force, how appearances can deceive, and how actions, even indirect ones, carry consequences. The beauty of their legacy lies in their adaptability. Passed down from generation to generation, retold and reinterpreted, they continue to offer guidance without preaching lessons, without lecturing. They remind us that human nature, for all its complexities, has fundamental patterns that repeat across time and culture. They are a quiet, enduring whisper of ancient wisdom still guiding us today. Think of how many times you've heard an idiom that originated from these very tales casually woven into modern conversation. They are more than stories. They are part of our shared consciousness. This enduring legacy of fables, now gently fading into the night, is a testament to the power of simple narrative to convey profound truths. They symbolize wisdom, timelessness, and the human desire to understand the world and ourselves. The gentle rustle of forgotten scrolls, the silent contemplation of ancient lessons, the profound stillness of the night. These are the authentic sounds and sensations of the whimsical world of ancient Greek fables. Settling into its timeless slumber, its quiet wisdom ready to greet another dawn. The ancient Greek hills now truly sleep, bathed in the soft glow of the moon. The wise animals and their human counterparts have settled into their timeless repose, their lessons echoing gently in the quiet air. You've journeyed through a world where cleverness, kindness, and sometimes folly taught truths that still illuminate our paths today. Let the stories settle in your mind not as rigid rules, but as soft murmurs of insight guiding you gently towards your own dreams. The whirring of the modern world recedes, replaced by the deep peace of ancient wisdom. Rest deeply knowing that the simplest tales often hold the profoundest truths ready to guide you as you drift into your own sweet slumber. Sweet dreams.